welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan.
Hi there.
And we're also here with James Chudley, an experienced director at CX Partners. Hello, James.
Hey, Guthrie. How you doing?
So, James, where are you?
I'm in Bristol in the UK. It's about 2 hours on the train out of London, kind of southwest UK near Devon and Cornwall.
Guthrie, you know where that is, right?
I do know where it is.
You don't.
No. I really do. Because you went to,
I was there.
Yeah.
I'm not,
so I know that because you were there. But I like how people can find Bristol by simply going to London and then taking the train.
Just go to London and turn left. It's fine.
Yeah,
and just follow the setting sun. It's easy.
So what is it exactly that you do? What's just so people kind of know who you are and what
who the heck are you, James?
Yeah, who the heck are you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I spend my time running large-scale user-centered design projects here at CX Partners. So all of our work involves users and user research. So we typically spend lots of our time finding out how people go about doing things in their everyday lives and trying to make their lives easier by redesigning things to make them easier to use, in a nutshell. And we work with websites and apps, and then typically more and more we're working with things that aren't digital, like services and products and companies, trying to make companies work better and encourage companies to adopt user-centered design themselves and helping them to grow their own teams and changing the way that companies work. So it's really interesting how the nature of our work has changed over the years and is continually changing as well.
So, James, do you remember at all how we first met? Because I don't.
Yeah,
I remember being at your offices, which I guess is your old offices, right?
That's right.
Bristol. And I remember us talking at a UXPA event somewhere.
No, that's right. Yeah, in Vegas. That was exciting.
In Las Vegas? Is that when we were in Las Vegas? Is that where, did I meet you there, or had we already known each other there? See, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think you came to Bristol first because we.
Would make sense.
Yeah. I think you kindly came along and gave a talk to our a group that I helped organise in Bristol. So we set up a group years ago called the Bristol Usability Group.
Yeah.
Which is a group of like-minded people who are working in what was, I suppose, then the usability field, which has broadened quite significantly, of course, to follow trends in the industry and things. But so I think that was the first time we met when you
when I came to do the talk, which we did like in a bar.
That's right. So a lovely bar.
I really remembered that.
Yeah, there's a great little bar called the Watershed, and that group's kind of continued and grown. It's amazing how big the UX community is here in Bristol. It's just one of these hubs in the UK that seems to have evolved over time and attracted lots of people for some reason, I guess. I'm not sure exactly why, within the kind of the UX field.
We've got
an amazing community here.
Field of user experience and designing so that things are fit people is huge in the UK. I don't know if you know that over here in the United States, we often have conversations about why are there so many UX people over in the UK?
Hey,
really?
Yeah. So James, out of all the countries, in your opinion, what country do you think has the best UX usability experience culture?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, because funny enough, I was reflecting on this the other day when I was thinking about the people who've kind of influenced me through my career. And when I first started working in this industry, I guess I didn't really realize I was working in the field of user experience at all. But I did find myself following lots of, I used to have these kind of RSS feed things set up. So quite often in the morning at work, I'd read all these articles written by people, and the majority of those articles were written by people in the States. So I guess, funnily enough, I've often thought the same thing that you were saying there, Susan, about, well, where are the thought leaders and where's that coming from? And it certainly felt like those earlier influences were certainly in the States. But I guess it's interesting how the industry's grown and where those hubs are now located.
Well,
and we're lucky in the UK.
I mean, the thing with the United States is we're very large and spread out. So
and loud.
So if you're going for quantity of thought leaders, I feel we might lead, but for quality of culture when it comes to UX.
Oh, really, Guthrie?
Well, because like you said, there are a lot of places, even now, and it's less and less all the time. And I'm sure it's, 5 years ago was it 4 or 5 years ago when we started out, we would, and it's still true today, we'd find companies who did not have anyone. I mean, this wasn't a mom and pop. This would be like, a company with hundreds or thousands of employees, and they would not have a UX person, or much less a team.
Yeah, it's. I mean, and James, you probably know this because I've been in the field, whatever the heck that means, because it's changed so much and the name has changed. But I've been in this field of the intersection of people and technology for a very long time, and it's Guthrie's right. We recently went and gave a speech for an internal conference at a really large healthcare company in the U.S. And, typically large companies in healthcare in the U.S. are, they're fairly savvy about user experience stuff. And this company is definitely savvy about tech stuff. And
this is definitely like many billions of dollars.
Yeah. I mean, this is a huge company, and they 5 years ago they hired their first UX person,
right?
And now they have over 200. So they grabbed it and went fast. But to me, for a company that large in that modern an industry, to have just started on UX 5 years ago, I guess, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but it surprised me.
Yeah, I think certainly a thing I've noticed over the years is both the nature of who our clients are in terms of their job title, how that's changed massively from being maybe marketeers years ago to now becoming product managers, but also how teams of UX have grown within our client organizations. So it always used to be the case. It was kind of a client-supplier relationship, and then it shifted fairly recently, I'd say, to working peer-to-peer. I can remember a project working with Hotels.com about, maybe 6 years ago, where we were just working in parallel with their UX team, and it wasn't like we were the experts telling them what they should be doing. We were just an extension of their team of experts, and we were just sharing the work between ourselves. And so, we were being kind of told what to do and almost being treated like an additional source of resource, if you like. And that shift has continued. See huge amounts of, companies creating their own teams in-house, creating innovation departments. And so I think a lot of agencies or consultancies now have their competitors are these in-house teams.
So, I have a whole rant on that.
Okay.
And I'd like to get your opinion on whether you think this is true or not, because one of the things that I often talk about if I'm talking to UX people, especially consultants outside a company, is that one of the reasons your projects get into trouble and become very messy and kind of blow up on you, if they do, is that there's a difference in expectation about whether you as the outside person are acting as what I call a consultant or acting as a contractor. And if you don't if you don't know and it hasn't been discussed, this will rear its head. So what happens typically is all unconsciously. You come in as the consultant and you think of yourself as the consultant, which means you think of yourself as the expert with the knowledge who's going to guide and advise. And that's your role. And again, as I said, this is not even discussed. You may not even realize you're doing this. And that works really well if that's the expectation that the client has. But sometimes what happens is they don't think that. They think they're the expert, they're in charge, and you are an extra pair of hands, which is not a bad thing, but it's just a very different role. And so as the project moves along, and you both start getting really annoyed because, you say to them, I really think it would be best if we did blah, blah, blah. And they say, we're not going to do that. Why won't you just do what I told you to do? And then, when I play, sometimes my role is therapist to consultants,
Yep.
they'll come to me and they'll say, I don't, like, she seems really annoyed. And, she keeps asking me, why do I keep saying that? And I don't understand what's going on. And then that'll, usually that's the red light. And I say, well, who's the expert? And the consultant says, well, I am. I'm the consultant. Right?
Yeah, right.
And the client says, well, no, I am. I know my project. You're supposed to be helping out. So this is something that I think is really important to, establish and work through if it starts to go awry. And I'm wondering how have you had that experience, and how have you? Because you said you think it's starting to shift more and more, where the client is the one that's really running the show, and you're assisting.
Yeah, I think it's often quite clear from the early stages of a project as to what that dynamic's going to be, from, I guess, the perspective of the experience of the people you're working with, and also the terms upon which the engagement's been established. Because you may be in a situation where someone's saying, look, we don't know how to do what you guys do, and we want you to do it for us, but we want to then take on that work moving forward. So we don't want to work with you for a long period of time. And then it's quite clear what the dynamic is. But I think it's the kind of thing that you'd have to, I'm just trying to think whether I've got some experience of where that's been a dynamic that we've had to actually broach with someone we've been working with and say, look, what's going on here? But it seems to me that it becomes very apparent quite early on, and that if someone is being that overly, I'm the consultant, I know the answers, then often that goes really horrifically wrong, because often the people that we're working with are as experienced as we are. And
so you're just saying that it's the Americans that have this problem.
No,
and
not at all.
The UK are you guys are too prepared and nice, and you work it all out ahead of time. I would believe that.
No, I don't think so at all. No, not at all. Because interestingly, I think you get the same dynamics sometimes within, I don't know, sort of speaking from the environments I've worked in within, say, working within an agency environment, and then maybe you bring a contractor in to work on a project who are like a freelancer. And sometimes they take the view that because they are a freelancer, they may be in a slightly different position of knowledge, maybe, and maybe what they say goes, or people who are being brought into project teams as specialists, which is a really interesting dynamic. And I think there are all these things that kind of contribute to the end result, don't they? I mean, I was talking to a friend today at work talking about all of these things that impact on the quality of design, and there are all these other forces at play. These politics and these dynamics within project teams that will have an impact on the end result. And those are the things that make work hard, I think. How do you get through these things? They've got nothing to do with the thing you're making, but you have to resolve them in order to make the thing good.
There's this guy years ago, his name is Weinberg, I believe, and he wrote a book called The Secrets of Consulting. Do you know his book? This is from decades ago. He was a software developer, and he wrote like software methodologies in the 1990s, and he has that phrase, all problems are really people problems.
Absolutely.
So all right, I have a totally different question. Okay,
go on.
when I was in Bristol with you many years ago,
Yeah.
you actually recorded a podcast with me, and
That's
we
right.
were talking about photographs and photography,
Yeah.
because that was then at least something that you were very involved in. You were an avid photographer. Are you still?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those joyful hobbies that can kind of come and go and fit around your life. So I've got a couple of young children now, so it's that's
How
had
many is a couple?
well two.
How old are they?
7 and 5. 7 and 5.
Oh.
So the kind of landscape photography that I used to do lots of, that I don't do so much of that at the moment.
There's
It's
a
more,
little bit of a landscape in the background, but
yeah,
in
or
the
maybe in the
foreground.
back garden, maybe that's so there's a bit of
Yeah.
that going on. But no, I do still manage to take lots of pictures, and I still love it. So yeah, and I love it, and that was really a bit of an experiment to see whether there was a way that I could weave my hobby into my job, which is always a good thing to try and do, I think.
Has it worked?
I think what was interesting about it was that there was a thing that I thought was important, and it came from watching things happening within user research. And the whole premise behind it was that we were conducting some research with a company that sold frozen food, actually, frozen ready meals. And it was really interesting seeing the way that people reacted to the photography that was used on a website, and the conclusions they drew from that photography, that some of which weren't necessarily true, but were massively advantageous to our clients. So for example, there was a photo of a delivery van driving through the snow, and the people who we were doing the research with were saying things like, "This company's amazing. They'll deliver the food whatever the weather," and the client was loving it. They were watching. They were kind of doing cartwheels in the observation room, thinking this is amazing. And it just made me think that photography is such a powerful thing. Way of communicating things, but it may be communicating things that you have no idea of, or that you really don't want to be communicated. So from a design perspective, shouldn't we be thinking more about the photography we're choosing within the products we design? And the other kind of the catalyst to that was that I'd observed over many years of the photography being the kind of poor relation within the design process, that it would never be budget for it, or that we'd have to use really dodgy stock photos, or you know what I mean. So it was the poor relation, but it was having a huge impact on the user experience and the way that things were being used and perceived. And I thought, oh, this is amazing. There's something in this, because when I take pictures, I design the photo. I go out at a certain time of the morning. I deliberately shoot the pictures in a certain way because I want to elicit a certain response from the people who are viewing them. And so I was designing the photo. So shouldn't we be thinking more about the photography we're using? So that's where it all came from, and it just kind of became a thing, which was cool. It was really exciting. It felt like we were breaking new ground or identifying a new thing, and it seemed to resonate as well.
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking about that when I visited you, which was that like, I think it was 2013.
That sounds right.
That sounds about right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So, and I remember talking about that, and it seemed like an obvious but fairly new thing to think about as for me, and I think I probably mentioned this to you, as a UX person and a psychologist and a behavioral scientist, but not being, I'm not a photographer. So it was obvious that would be true, but I hadn't thought about it. Do you think that's has that changed in the last 4 years? Are people now, much more cognizant of, do you think, in the design field, of the power of the photograph?
I don't know. I'd love to imagine that the fact that I wrote a very short book on it has changed the world, but in reality, let's be realistic.
It's a good book too. You should. What is the name of that book? You should say.
It's called The Usability of Web Photos, and it's up on Amazon, and it's about, I think it's about £1.50 or £2. So super cheap. It's a nice quick read. But
really good.
For those not in the UK. That's a
he's
unit
not,
of currency,
he's not talking about
not
the weight. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yes, yeah. God, no.
Because £1 would be the appropriate weight of a book.
Yeah.
No, it's an ebook, so it's weightless.
It's weightless.
But I
Although it
think
has great weight in other ways.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, without doubt. I think what was interesting about that was that the more I talked about it, the more it seemed to resonate with people. But I think the problems that were getting in the way of people doing something about it are still there in terms of budgets not being maybe dedicated to photography in the right way, or actually maybe typically in the design process, the job of choosing photography doesn't, I don't think, ever really fall with someone who would describe themselves as a usability person or a UX person. Often that's within the reign of someone else, maybe an art director, who will be thinking about maybe photography, possibly just from a brand point of view, and not from a how's this going to be perceived and what's the job of this photo? Is it just illustrative, or does it have a purpose? And if it has a purpose,
yeah, I know. I remember talking about that, and I still feel like it's not. I still feel like you're right. You're right. I think it's probably a combination of, I mean, people just not used to thinking about it enough, but about this intersection of that and the roles, right? Because as a UX person, I may know it's important, but it's not my job to pick or take the photos, and so it falls off my radar because I can't control it, and then.
And there's never enough budget for anything ever.
Well, but what comes first, right? Is the budget not there because people don't realize how critical it is, or, and it's so important. I talk about, and I've been checking out all the really fascinating work on peripheral vision, for instance. And, we know that, photos are so critical in peripheral vision in conveying information, and on your peripheral vision controls where you look next, and images with emotional content get processed faster in peripheral vision than central vision, and so the whole photographic element is so important. And I'm working right now with a client, and we're kind of studying the whole phenomenon of fake news, and so I had the chance to talk to a person in California. His name is Stephen Frenda, Frenda, and he's a behavioral scientist. I'm actually not sure exactly what his field is, but he did some research on the impact of photographs and in their role in fake news. And he just did this great series of studies which included, showing people photographs about news events, and how much the photograph, whether there was a photo and what the photo was about, had influenced their memory of the event, of whether it had even occurred or what had happened. And so I'm always, working with that recently, I've been reminded again how very critical the photos are. I remember not too long ago, or it's shortly after I think you and I met, and we were talking about photographs. I was working with a client, automobile client, and they had this whole series of photos for their website redesign, and of cars, right? And they had several photos where they were from a very weird angle, and so the car it was like the front of the car, but you were kind of below it, and the car looked very aggressive. I mean, it was coming at you really fast.
Which was deliberately, presumably.
But there was always like a vulnerable person standing in front, it looked like the car was about to mow down the woman or the family. And I was like, asking them, did they do that on purpose? Did they know that, they had an aggressive car about to mow down a family? And they looked at me like I was crazy. They really did, like, what the heck are you talking about? So I don't know whether, they just didn't care, or whether they didn't realize, or maybe they wanted that effect.
I think it reminds me actually of a photo shoot that I was involved with years ago for a website for a car manufacturer that we're working on, and the photographer was talking about how there are classic angles that you shoot a car from that makes the car look great, and they were trying to make this car look really high end, and really it had some certain design features that were kind of reminiscent of possibly Ferrari, but it was a family car, so it was a bit like, just acknowledge the fact you've got kids, you need to carry a load of stuff around, you're never going to own a Ferrari, but this is just, this will just keep the dream alive. So there was some deliberate design styling on this car.
Maybe it was the same company.
Maybe, yeah, maybe, but there are some. I think with certain products, I think with anything, there will be ways that you shoot it. So people who are going to take pictures of the inside of houses, if they're trying to sell houses or hotel rooms, they'll do it in a certain way, and there'll be like a signature style. So, and there'll be rules probably around the ways in which you should never shoot a certain object like a car, because it will just look boring or mundane. And so I think that's fairly typical. But what's interesting is that it might not be a view that you'd ever see as an owner of that car, and actually something that might be more beneficial.
Yeah, you're usually not kneeling in front of the car.
Have you ever looked at some of the car ads from, like, I don't know, maybe like 1986? They're modern enough to not be cool.
Yeah.
But they're definitely old enough to to look really old and drab. So if you go and you find I encourage you to do this. Go find like the ads for like an 86 Honda Accord or something, or anything, and it'll have just this amazing photo shoot with the sports person, and and of course they're standing in front of what we would consider just this junky, ugly, boxy heap of like driving trash. But like the photo shoot is this glamorous photo shoot, and they're at like some sort of like fancy rich estate dinner. It's very entertaining.
Well, I guess what this is illustrating is there's a complete difference between the motivations of a photographer and maybe the business or the client who are commissioning the photographer, because they're trying to sell a product and they're trying to make it look like maybe something that it isn't, and then the motivations of the person who might want to buy that car. And we were aware of this with a recent client project where we said, well, actually, could we make the photographer think like a UX person? So we tried to brief the photographer. We tried to kind of explain what UX and usability was, which was a really interesting experience, because of course the photographer was like, well, I don't know what you're talking about, and got them to shoot specifically for the web and specifically for a responsive design project as well. Again, the photographer was like, I don't know what you mean, I don't know what you're talking about, but it seemed crazy to us that, well, they're creating assets for this thing we're making. They have to understand the thing we're making in order to shoot photography in the most appropriate way. So we then tried to feed in user needs and requirements into the commissioning of the photo shoot, so they knew what the user was thinking when they were going to be viewing their photos. And it was a really interesting experiment to completely rework the way that photography was commissioned.
Well,
did it work?
Because they're artists.
Well, yeah, but this is the thing, because you think normally the way that the dilemma of, you always think like, what makes a great UX person? Well, it's someone who understands the business context. Let's assume you're working for a commercial organization. They understand the business and they understand the user, and they can design things and make things that balance the requirements from both of those potentially competing viewpoints. But then if you throw a photographer in the mix, the photographer wants to create beautiful images that are probably going to be great for their portfolio. The business wants great photographs as well, but they have certain needs they want to, or messages they want the photography to communicate. From a user point of view, they've got, again, certain questions they'd want the photography to answer. So how do you, I mean, with this was case in point actually, when we were discussing individual images for individual pages, and I was saying, well, right, the user needs these are the questions the user is going to come to this page with in their mind. And then the business were putting forward, well, we want the photography to do these things. And the photographer was like, oh, I want to commission a helicopter because it would be cool. And you're like, well, how on earth are we going to come to an agreement? How can we? And the photographer is also, like you were saying, is an artist. And they were like, I want to own this bit of the process. This is down to me. I want to come up with the ideas and really push the boundaries of the locations and the subject matter, because I want to shoot something that's cool and is going to be exciting and allow me to use different tools and techniques. So you've got this amazing, again, the thing that seemed quite simple was massively complicated in terms of these potentially conflicting requirements and objectives.
So do you think we should we should go with trying to create a subset of people who are photographers but now understand that they're kind of UX photographers, they're specialists, or should we take UX people and try to make them photographers if we want to fill this hole?
Yeah, no, I think photographers are photographers, but it's just briefing them in a certain way. So it was interesting, the conversation I had with this guy who took the photos for the project I worked on, and said, look, I don't know how the commissioning process normally works, but I'm going to write you a brief in the same way that I would write a brief for, say, a web design project or whatever it might be. And it was interesting to talk with him about the sorts of briefings he normally had, or the lack of briefings he had in terms of direction, and just feed him with the information that I thought he needed to try and guide the process to make sure we got the output we needed to get to, and also remind him of where his work was going to go. So showing him some of the page designs with a placeholder for where his images were going to sit, and explaining to him how those pages reflowed on a mobile device compared to a desktop or a laptop or whatever it might be, and said, actually, this is going to change the way you compose the image, because when someone views this on a desktop, you've got the image was like a long kind of letterbox style rectangle. So when he composed the image, he had to put the subject of the image in a certain part of the frame because of the way the typography was showing on the left-hand side of the picture. So he had to kind of compose things to suit. But then when that image was shown on a mobile device, the image was cropped in a different way, and it had to then contain information within a different part of the image. So it was really fascinating to give him these requirements to see how he responded to it. So I think if you said, actually, let's get rid of all the photographers and let's just, the UXers can take the photos, then it's not going to work. But it's giving them the information they need to understand the context within which their images are going to be viewed.
So is this your next ebook you're going to write for us?
Well,
how to create a brief for a photographer?
Well, interesting. I wrote this up, actually. It's on Medium. It's an article called "How to Run a User-Centered Photo Shoot." And
wonderful!
That's as far as I've got with it. I can share the links with you, and if everyone just Googles that, they should find it. And it's really I just wrote up the story because it was an amazing opportunity to be given. We were in charge or responsible for redesigning a client's website. It was for the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, based in London here in the UK, and then we were subsequently given a brief to commission some photography for some of those pages. At which point I got really excited. I thought, wow, we can try this, and let's try and make this photo shoot a bit more user centered. And I don't know if we were successful or not, but it was an amazing opportunity and a really interesting to try a different way of working with quite an established process. So the whole story's there within that article. I can share those links with you. And it just kind of tells the whole story of how we briefed the photographer, what happened during the photo shoots, the problems we had, the things we learned, the stuff that happened that I would have never anticipated, the kind of disasters we had. It's all there.
Yeah, definitely. Send us those links, and I will put them in the blog post when I talk about this podcast, because that sounds really really interesting. So photography, you were into this whole idea of photography and design when we talked several years ago, and you're still into it. But tell me what else you're working on, or what's new, or what you'd like to be working on.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about. I'm just reflecting on the sorts of things I've been talking about at conferences and things over the last couple of years, and I did a lot on photography, and then that's kind of moved into just thinking more about, as I myself was moving into more kind of leadership roles from practitioner skills or practitioner roles, thinking about what were the things that make people good at being leaders and managers, and then more recently also thinking about what are the things that make good UXers good, because lots of people, perhaps because the industry still seems to be booming and growing and lots of people want to move into the industry, I quite often get asked, what skills do I need to have? how can I get a job? How's that going to work? So I've been reflecting a lot on that actually, and thinking about, why are some projects more successful than others, and what are those dynamics that are going on, and what can we learn from projects and try and make more and more projects more successful, and people work in a way that works better for them, really. So I suppose, yeah, my focus has shifted a little bit because of the types of, not so much the types of projects I've been working on, but I am continually working on projects and continually trying to think, well, how can we make this better? How can this work?
So can you share with us one of your ideas that maybe is like counterintuitive or surprising, or
what do you mean in terms of what specifically?
In terms of what makes a UX project work, or what makes leadership in a project? I mean, all the things you were just talking about that you've been talking about when you're giving keynotes and so on. Share one of those with us that you think maybe isn't as obvious.
Yeah, I think from the UX practitioner side, I was really focusing on what I was seeing as being the soft skills that make a real difference to the project, the success of projects. What is it that good UXs bring to a project? Because I think people always focus on what I describe as the hard skills. Are you good at conducting interviews, or are you good at creating these kind of design artifacts, or can you use a certain software program? But actually, the things which are all things that I think you can learn. But actually, if you have these soft skills, such as being pragmatic, being a great communicator, being positive, and being resilient to the inevitable kind of highs and lows of a design project, those are the sorts of things that will make a massive difference to the quality of the output, the things you're working on, but also the experience that other people will have when working with you. Your ability to solve problems, you're just being curious about how the world works, and being a good listener, and all of these things. The more it's funny, you sort of think, I think there's something in this, and there must be a pattern, because I think as a UX person, I find myself continually looking for patterns and trying to work out why things work. What is it about that thing that is good, and what can I extract from that and reuse it for a different purpose? And so I guess it's quite a natural thought process for me to have. And then, you naturally start thinking about the projects you've worked on, the people you've worked with, and think, well, yeah, everyone can do the hard skills because it's commoditized and you have to be able to do it. But why was working with that person so much better, or felt so easy? And those seem to be really interesting things to identify.
Yeah, I remember years ago, I had a client who wanted to grow their user experience group in-house, and I think this was before it was called user experience. It was probably called a usability group at that point. Sure. And I was talking to, so they had asked me, it was actually a really weird request they had, because I was teaching a number of courses, a number of workshops in their company on user experience. And because this was long enough ago that a lot of the people coming to the classes were not usability or UX people. They were, they were developers, they were project managers, they were business analysts, right? All these different people they had inside the organization. And they had asked me, as you are teaching the workshops, we want you to identify the people that would be good at.
Oh, really?
Yeah. and I'm like, wait a minute, you want me to teach, or you want me to, how am I going to how am I going to do that? Well, just keep your eye out. And I was like, okay, guys, this is not, I don't know if this is a good idea. So I was not a fan of the idea, but it definitely got me thinking about, the kinds of things you're talking about, right? What does make for a good person? And essentially what I suggested they do, instead of me trying to do hidden evaluations of possible potential while I'm teaching a workshop, what we did was we did the workshop, and then we did an introductory workshop, and then we would let people know at the end of it that we were going to be doing this more in-depth training, and we let them self-select. Right. So the people who said, "Oh, I really want to learn more about this," were the people then that that became the candidates. But what was one of the things that came out of that was I decided that one of the most important qualities was a real excitement and passion for the work.
Yeah.
And that sounds like, oh, well, that's mundane. But, it's not mundane, because whenever I've mentored a lot of people, and the ones that stick with it and are still doing it, 5-10 years later, are the ones who just really, they find the work interesting and challenging, and they find the projects, right, and the whole problem solving that you're talking about, and the listening and the curiosity, that's the part of the work they really love, and so they're also then good at it. And I've seen the people who are just kind of doing it because, well, it's a good job and it pays fairly well, and I can get a job doing it, but they're not particularly excited about what it means to design in context. They don't last very long, and they get frustrated at the places where the project team isn't working together very well, or they get frustrated when people don't listen to them and just implement their design, and they leave. They end up going and doing something else, or not always, but often. So I've always put that, a passion for the work, that you're incredibly curious about people and about people, using stuff, and you're really passionate about wanting to not just design, but design something that works for the users and works for the business. That this is every time you're working on one of these projects, it's like an interesting puzzle to solve, and you like that. Those are the people that I think, really do well in it and are pretty good designers. But
Yeah, of course.
That was just always one of my criteria.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think fundamentally, of course, you think, well, you have to be interested in people and the way they go about living their lives and the things they do and the problems they face and wanting to make things better. I think if you're not particularly interested in improving things, then you're going to struggle. But I think that curiosity is massively important. I just think of the amount of times that I've been faced with a new brief from a client, and I may have never heard of their company before. I might not know anything about their sector, and so all of a sudden you're kind of exposed to this new world that you didn't know existed.
Yeah.
And then you get the privilege, I feel, of learning more about this new area, and then understanding the problems that people are facing. And then I think that's the bit that really has always excited me, is like, you feel, I know what the problems are, and I know now how we can solve these problems and make stuff better. And that's fantastic. That's always been, I feel, really privileged to be able to do that type of work. That's amazing. And I think it's those sorts of things that, fundamentally, if that doesn't interest you or excite you, then you're gonna struggle, because why would you care? Like, why would you bother to fight the fights to make the thing better? Because not that all projects involve fighting, but it's important to get your voice heard.
I think they are. I think they do.
Well, yeah, there is a bit of that.
Involve fighting against something, right? I mean, it might be fighting against the constraints, or fighting it. I mean, I don't mean fighting it. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's just kind of this interesting. It's like fighting against entropy. I mean, there's always these interesting things that just occur, right? And that's part of what you have to overcome. But I agree with you, and I don't think there's anything wrong with not being interested in that. I mean, not everybody in the world needs to be fascinated by, people and people doing things, right? I mean, that's absolutely. To some people that would be like, what? It's boring, or that's that's not how I want to spend my time. So I think, but I think you're right. I think you have to be really interested in people, and you have to be interested in people. So, I mean, I just know I've seen some people who are like, oh, well, why are they doing that? They shouldn't do it that way.
Yeah, they're wrong.
Right? Yeah, why if they just change the way they're doing it, it'll be fine. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's that. But the interesting thing is, why are they doing it that way, right?
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think too, just like if you think about a really simple thing, like observing uh, a user test, observing a person using a product or service, and just watching them do it, and then they do something, and they do something that is, some people would consider quote wrong,
Hmm.
right? They press the wrong button or whatever. And is your reaction, why the heck did they do that, or why are they so stupid that they do that, or what's wrong with them, or is your reaction, wow, look at that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
wonder what they're thinking right now, or I wonder why they would have I wonder why they chose that, So it's that kind of basically wanting to run experiments.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't feel qualified at all to do my job. I studied environmental science, so I'm a scientist. But I think it's kind of, I say it flippantly, but actually I think lots of people within the industry and have come from hugely different backgrounds. I was joking with a colleague the other day who actually had a degree in the job that he was doing, was just saying, well, you're cheating. None of us have got degrees in what we're doing. I've come from a hugely different background, but the fact that I was I came from a science background, I suppose. I found that really helpful through this whole idea of running experiments within design and taking this idea that
Yeah.
design is never finished, and that's been really liberating for me. Having read books like Lean Startup and thought, well, hey, I understand experiments, and everyone has a hypothesis. Oh, that's cool. I understand what that means, and we can all just run this thing as a bit of an experiment. And let's just see and find out where we go and what works and what doesn't work. And I guess where I was coming from with the talks I was doing is that I was trying to make people realize that they probably already had the skills that they would need to be good at being a UXer, whatever that means. And it was a kind of a bit of a rallying cry to say, well, come along. You can learn the kind of hard skills, not the difficult skills, but you can learn how to use it might be some wireframing software, or it might be whatever it might be. You can learn that, it's fine. But fundamentally, if you don't have those personality traits or those interests, then you're going to struggle. So that was the thing that I felt was important, and it really important for people to understand that if they had those things, that they could be nurtured and they could grow the other things. But the soft skills were the things that would make them stand out.
That's true in a lot of industries, though. Like a lot of the
Yeah,
things you
absolutely.
described. So I went to law school, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, and I'm thinking about my my law classes, and the people who at the end of the day, it's like, do you have soft skills? Do you have do you have an interest in actually figuring out what's going on? I mean, these are things that translate well into success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose there's lots of people moving between sectors all the time, aren't there? And you will have had formal training to do a thing, but there are these hugely transferable skills that it's important for people to
Especially when it
recognize.
comes to people, because really, between the law and use, I mean, it's really because you're working with people and trying to understand why people have done a certain thing
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
certain
So
way.
maybe that there's lots of transferable skills. So from let's look at the kind of the research part of doing UX work. Then you can imagine lots of other professions that involve spending time with people, nursing, counselling, all of these sorts of things. We think actually they probably make quite good researchers because they're interested in people, they know how to talk to people, they're good at building rapport with people.
Mm-hmm.
All of
Well,
that's
yeah,
great, isn't
we
it?
have a friend and colleague who's a UX person now and has been for many years. And
Oh,
when
yeah.
I met him, he had been a family counselor,
Oh, really? I think
a
Ah,
there's
nice.
therapist. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that
right.
was he was
Yeah.
trained as a therapist, and he wanted to do, I'm not sure exactly why, I don't remember exactly why, but he wanted to do usability work. But he didn't know I mean, he'd never been a designer. He didn't
No.
know much about technology. And essentially came to me and said, "Can you help me do this?" And so I mentored him, and he's been doing it. He's been,
Oh,
I mean,
amazing.
goodness, it's been Guthrie like 17 years, right? That
Well, I
he's
mean,
been.
you can't ask me. I was not around for
He's been
the early
doing this
days.
for a long time now, and he's really successful. And he's always so wonderful. And thank you. We just saw him not too long ago, and
Yeah,
he
yeah, he's
thanked us
great.
again. But yeah. So I mean, there, right? He's someone who listened well, and right. So I think that's interesting too. I'm teaching. I'm an adjunct instructor at University of Wisconsin, and I teach a course each semester, and that's in an undergraduate
Okay.
program that is in the official title of the program now. It just switched is Human Technology Interaction, but essentially, we're training UX people, and so it's interesting because most of the people so far, it's in the computer science department. And a lot of the people that end up coming into the major, are coming at it from some of them are coming at it from a technology point of view. Others maybe from a like digital photography kind of point of view, And so the faculty, we all have this goal to not only teach them, the some of the faculties there teaching them, design and prototyping and that kind of thing, and HTML, and then some of them, like me, I'm teaching like human information processing, and the behavioral science psychology part. But we all are employing certain skills so that they learn, there's lots of all the instructors, all the professors, they have presentations they have to give, they have teamwork they have to do, they have client work they do, they have they have to study research articles, and so it's it's very hands-on, and I think we're trying to build in those skills. And you can see it's actually kind of fun because I have sometimes students that I have over several semesters, and you can see that it's helping them, where you have people who were not very good communicators and now have had to, stand up and present, 17 times. And now they're finally, right? I mean, some of them are very good from the beginning, but others of them really struggle with it. And now they're finally getting to the point where they know how it works. They know how to do it, and it's fun to see them grow in that regard. And I don't think that I think once you get in the workplace, I don't know how much of that. I mean, I think everyone thinks it's valuable, but somehow if you're going to do training, that's not what you're going to do a workshop on,
Well, I mean, I think we often, it's funny because all we do is we do a lot of thinking about people and the interactions between people. And there is almost no place weirder than the work environment. Which you're just like mashing together all these people who would not normally do a thing together.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very strange.
It's bizarre, isn't it? And you sort of wonder how it. I always think you sort of. I had this kind of theory that no one should ever criticize someone else's work because you will never understand what it took to make that thing happen. Because you know what I mean? Like, all these things will happen behind the scenes that are just ridiculous things, things with no, people were off sick, things broke, just kind of life conspired against you, whatever it might be. And everything that's gone live will have a brilliant story behind it, won't it? Of the trials and tribulations that took to make that thing happen. But I think that was one thing I talked to a friend in Bristol a lot about, actually, and his view is that graduates are coming through and people are being trained because there's now a massive demand for people to learn the sorts of skills we're talking about to kind of feed the industry, but they also need to be ready for the world of work. And how do you learn that? How do you pick up on the nuances of like you were saying, Guthrie, the madness of work? How do you learn that stuff without doing it? And is it better to go and do loads of extra study, or is it better to actually go to work and get a job and learn the rules of work and the way that things work from maybe a sort of supplier-client relationship? How does that work, or how do the dynamics work within a big organization? And how much of work is just understanding that stuff and being able to to kind of use it in a way that makes the output successful. How I think it's a huge part of it, isn't it? I mean, it's something that I probably don't realize so much because I'm so used to it. But as a graduate, that's a massive thing, isn't it? Such a weird world to get involved in.
Yeah, and I don't think we build in enough patience. I think we expect that, everyone. I wish we had more. I wish in the U.S. I don't know if it's any different in the U.K., but I wish we had more of an apprenticeship model. I wish we knew, we understood that there were some extremely talented people who maybe need some time to get used to some of this, right? And we need to give them work to do and projects to do and pay them for it. I mean, they're not going to be. We can't just expect them to go to school forever.
Yeah.
It has to be real, and they have to be working with other people. But they may not be able to get it all in the first 30 days, and that's okay, and that there's someone there that can mentor them and grow them and guide them a little. I just think we don't do a very good job at that, and we don't appreciate the I'm really impressed with the students in our program, and we're a small school in the middle of Wisconsin. This isn't MIT. We're not necessarily getting the stellar, most amazing students in the country. We're getting regular people, and regular people are really amazing. And the quality of the work that they can do, and the quality of the thought, the smarts they bring to it. I've been really, really impressed. And I think that, and I'm a little saddened sometimes as they leave the program and they're trying to get jobs. And there's jobs out there for them, they're skilled and they have a degree in technically computer science. But it's like the jobs sometimes seem, so mundane, all right, now that you've learned all this stuff, now go write code, and I was having a conversation with one of my students who said, I really want to do UX work. I want to stay though in central Wisconsin where there isn't a ton of UX work. And
right.
So she wanted to know what job should she take?
Right.
That would eventually, because it's not going to be a UX, if it's not a UX job, what should she take so that she can still somehow get there,
Wow.
And there wasn't
a career pathway.
Yeah, and there wasn't a definite career path, and so actually, luckily,
literally family counseling.
Yeah, she should be a family counselor. No, luckily there was some, around here the students often tend to stay here, so there were some previous students that had eventually made their way to a UX job they liked, and so, I got them in touch with this woman so they could say, okay, go ahead, take the web design job over here, and eventually you'll be able to make your way. But I wish, there's such a need, right, for UX people.
Absolutely,
do wish we had a kind of a better way to do it.
I think I was reflecting on. I did a talk to some students recently myself, and I was kind of anticipating questions about, what do I need to bring to a company, or what do I need to kind of demonstrate in order to be employable and get a job? And I was thinking about this idea of apprenticeships as well, and thinking actually, what if within a company environment, what would you want from a graduate? And you want people who are full of ideas and enthusiastic and have all of those qualities that you may not have within maybe potentially like an established team of people who've been working for a while. So it's worth people considering the sorts of things they can bring to a work environment that will really kind of nourish the rest of the team, even if they feel they don't have a huge amount of work experience. That idea of just being really enthusiastic, really positive, willing to learn, try stuff out, all of that stuff. Like, you don't have to have any experience to do that. You can just decide for that to be your position on things and the way that you're going to act and behave. And I think that's going to be hugely beneficial for people who are looking for a bit of a step up. And I guess the other thing is the joy of a lot of the work you end up doing as a UXer, you can do off your own back. You don't have to wait to get a job to be able to try it out. There's nothing stopping you from evaluating some things that exist in the world, or having a go at redesigning things, and then building up this set of case studies or stories that you can show people. So why not?
That's exactly the advice I gave this one woman. And there was this article, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'll have to, Guthrie, maybe you can remind me, and I'll put it in the blog post about the podcast, because it was this great, I tweeted about it. It was this great, some UX person had, okay, this is going to bother me. I may have to go look it up while you guys are talking about
a case study of something they were doing.
Yes, it was and they had done, and the reason it was so wonderful was they told it as a story. They had evaluated and done a little redesign on one of their favorite e-commerce sites that they used, and it was such a wonder, and they said, well, first I did this, and then they showed a little picture, right, talking about photographs, and then I did this, and then there was another little picture, and it was so effective because it was in story format and had these wonderful little photos of the work they had done. And I showed this to my student that I'm working with who's looking for a job. And I said, don't do a regular portfolio, do this, go pick a project, just pick a website like they did, and you do everything you learned and take photos of it and write a little story. And I said, if you do this, this will get you a job, right? Because I just know that if I were hiring and someone showed me that, I'd go, this is great. They obviously know what they're doing. They know the right terminology. They did the right methodology. And then they have these great little pictures, and it's a wonderful story. So,
I did read that. I found it. It was on Zara, on the clothes manufacturer retailer, Zara.
Yes. Who's the author of that?
William Ng, who's product design freelance, UCLA. And it's the beauty of it is you're right. It's this idea of telling stories, because you think so many of the parts of doing work are about telling stories. You pitch for new work, you tell stories about the stuff you've done in the past. If you want to influence or inform people during a project team of stuff that's really gone bad or really worked well in the past, you tell stories. You want in a final presentation to justify, even maybe talking through a set of user research, you tell stories. You just tell stories the whole time. That's just such a fundamental way that we're kind of used to communicating with each other. You chat with your colleagues what you did at the weekend. You're telling stories. You just, the more you think about it, we all just spend our lives telling stories, and we're really good at it. That's kind of, it's a fundamental thing. And I think that ability then to tell a story, but then reflect on what you did and what worked well and what didn't work well, is a really good thing for people to be able to do. Just looking through this example, the Zara case study, it might be that they created some job stories. Why did you do it? Was that useful? How would you have changed the way that worked? I think having the ability to reflect on the way you've done something is massively important, because there's always that pinch point within a project where you get given a problem to solve, and then you've got to decide how you're going to do it. And I've ended up working more around, I design projects more than I design things, because I'm involved in the kind of deciding how we're going to solve a problem in terms of what process we're going to follow, what tools, techniques, activities we're going to do alongside the people I'm working with, and we'll kind of design it that way. So again, it's a design challenge in its own right. But after every project, we hold a wash-up session, say what worked well, what didn't work so well, why did we do it that way, what were we thinking, what should we change? And again, you're kind of changing things. There's no right or wrong way of doing things. You have to come up with an idea of how you're going to solve a problem and stick to it, and then continually challenge yourself during that process of, is it working, is it not working? But the other thing I'd add is this idea of almost keeping a diary during projects as well, because I find you get to the end of a project, you can't remember what you did. And so you sort of feel, well, how am I ever going to develop if I can't remember what I did and reflect on the bits that were good? And also it helps you in the future, because if you get a similar project, you think, this feels a bit like that other one. How did we do that one again? And which bits were good? Otherwise, I think that's such an important part of being a professional, actually, is just keeping those diaries and reminding yourselves and trying to continually improve and do things differently. Otherwise, I just think it would just get boring. Like, how is it ever going to be nourishing if you don't feel you're improving?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have some tough questions for you, James.
Go for it.
Put your feet to the fire here. Okay.
Okay.
Question number 1. In your opinion, what is currently the biggest challenge to your field? The biggest thing that's holding your field back from its full potential?
Oh, that's a good question. I think in many ways it feels like there's a lot of kind of self-reflection maybe, or endless kind of conversations around what user experience actually is, and how should we be developing, and what's good and what's bad. And you just think, well, and maybe that's just from spending too much time on Twitter and things like that, which is not potentially the most constructive thing to do. So I suppose I see a bit of that, and you just think, well, in many ways that kind of flies in the face of more liberating ways of working, like just running experiments and not trying to produce perfect things all the time. I think that idea of, the genius designer and perfection is just hopefully disappearing, and everyone's acknowledging that no one really knows, and we'll just make this thing and see what happens. And I found that, as I said earlier, I found that hugely liberating. So I don't feel there's a massive threat to the industry. I feel that the industry is continually growing. I think people are moving in different directions and describing themselves potentially in different ways, and just maybe broadening out their opportunities by maybe thinking about themselves as more of product designers or service designers, because again there's different opportunities there to work on different things. So it's really interesting just seeing how the industry is continually evolving, and I think it is a continual issue of how you try and keep up with things. I find that a challenge myself, actually. How can you continually keep up with what's going on within an industry that feels like it's changing every day?
All right, one more question.
Go.
So 10 years from now, in the industry, what who's the big winner? So everyone is running around, and there are obviously lots of different methodologies that people promote, and different ways of thinking, and different strategies, and there's this big confluence of ideas. 10 years from, if you were going to buy a stock in a UX idea, who's the big winner? What's the big winner?
You know what? It's interesting seeing how trends change and things emerge, because at the moment the big trends that I'm seeing are ideas around working within cross-functional teams and all working on the same problems together, working in kind of more agile, or very much not working in a kind of waterfall process. And it's interesting reflecting on these kind of cycles within the industry, that you'll talk to people who've been in the industry or working for a long time, and they'll be like, oh, I remember this. We did this years ago. This isn't anything new. So I wonder whether we'll be in a repeat cycle, and maybe I don't know, maybe waterfall will be the way to go. But I think fundamentally we'll always have this guiding light of knowing that the right thing to do is to put people at the heart of the way we're designing and who we're designing for, as a way of determining what we end up doing. So I think fundamentally, the philosophy, the approach won't change. The tools, the techniques, there'll be new acronyms, there'll be new flavors of the month. Of course there will be, for different reasons. But I think that call will be the same.
So you heard it here, guys. James says
it's going to be the same.
waterfall is the way to go.
Waterfall is the future. I think that's the takeaway from this entire hour long.
James is saying, why did I agree to come talk with these people?
I'm going to get writing my waterfall book now.
James, before we go, why don't you tell people how they can reach you if they want to get hold of you?
Yeah, sure. You can reach me via Twitter, of course, at Chudders. I write various bits here and there on Medium, as well as the CX Partners website.
So is that CHUDDERS?
Chudders. Yeah.
And is there anything else you'd like to plug?
Oh yeah, there is actually. I've been
Plug
thinking about
away.
this idea of checklists, and it was inspired by. There's a great, very famous radio program called Desert Island Discs, which is a kind of it's been going on forever. It's about 70 years old, and people talk on this radio program about if they were marooned on a desert island, which were the 7 records they'd choose to take with them. But really, the radio program was more about a story of their lives, and it's kind of a psychoanalysis in many ways of these people. It's fascinating. And there was one with a surgeon who developed this idea of checklists, and said actually if we just run through this checklist before we operated on people, we could hugely improve the success rates of surgery. And I wonder whether by creating checklists for the sorts of things that we do, we could make our work a bit easier and a bit more efficient. So I had a go at creating a checklist for conducting user research, and there's about 75 points on it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought and the more I worked out. So I'm just about to publish an article on that and share that checklist, and it will be available on the CX Partners blog hopefully tomorrow, but give us a week and it will be there.
Okay, so and to find the CX Partners blog, what's the best way to do that?
Or if you just Google CX Partners, which is CXPARTNERS, and away you go.
All right. Sounds good. James, thanks so much for
Awesome. It's
talking.
been a pleasure.
Are you coming over to the U.S. anytime soon that we could meet up or something?
No plans at the moment, but you never know.
Let me know, and if we're coming over to the UK, we'll let you know.
Awesome. That'd be amazing.
All right. And Guthrie,
Yeah.
if people want to reach us, they can...
Yeah, you can just email info@theteamw.com, and you can tweet at Susan at...
you can tweet me
yeah,
at the Brain Lady.
the Brain Lady. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, and everyone out there, I hope you all have a great week.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.